So the biggest advice I got was to stay chronological. So let's see if I can tell this story chronological. Um, in 2009, you'll see up here, 2009, which was right after 2008, when the economy really took a beating and real estate just really had problems, and there was massive foreclosures. There was a foreclosure on this property right here, 1515 Hensley Road, the property in question. Now, at the time, I lived in this house right here with my five daughters, four of whom were teenagers. So when this house went into foreclosure, it wasn't very long before squatters started moving in and stealing all the copper and doing drugs in this location. Well, nothing could be done because you can't do something about someone else's property. But I was fortunate enough in 2010 that I purchased this piece of property. Okay. So now I could make sure those people were no longer going to be in that house. So the next satellite image we have is in 2014. And you will notice that what happens is, and this has always been a question, in 2009, we would find that there is a horse barn with multiple horses down here in the corner. They had always owned horses across the street for the 19 years that I've lived in this property. But to understand this property here, we're going to get into when I describe the narrative, how it relates to this property. Okay, because you got to understand prior to 2009, back in the 80s, all of these houses were essentially the same. So we go to 2014. You'll see that I've started to clear the sites. I started to clear up. You would notice there was trash piles. This was all trash. There was a lot of cleanup. Also, I had all of my trees high limbed, and I started, and I had actually, that was after 2014. So we should see this in the next one. Is I spent a lot of time clearing out all of the pine trees. Now, this is obviously a winter shot, but also cleaning up all of the scrap trees, all the sweet gums, those kinds of things. Okay, so this is 2016. You'll notice that in 2016, they were finally getting back to building this neighborhood that went into hold in 2008. Okay, so it took them 6 years. That's why I don't understand why sometimes that I'm being rushed so much, because I don't have the advantage of just being able to throw a crew at these things. So then we go from 2016 to the next photograph is in 2019. So sometime between 2016 and 2019, you will see I put my first shipping container. Now, in all honesty, that happened in 2017. Okay. Um, because my mother passed away and she was a hoarder. And I knew that my children would one day want the things that she hoarded, because she always had the grandma closet that they could go in and pick stuff out of. And this shipping container is probably about 30%, 40%, this back end, all the things that they helped me clean out of my mother's house, which are the only remaining items that she has. All the other items were lost in a storage debacle with their grandfather. Okay. But you'll notice that I am constantly working on this property, and it has been such a great therapeutic value to me to actually work on it, but I don't rush. But in 2019, when this image was taken, I was actually working and had been working for 2 years on shoring up the structure because they used undersized beams. I was cutting all the spans in half with a drop girder. So you really can't see any work, but believe me, I was spending the time under the house. Well, in 2019, that's when I was notified that I had to stop working on the house because I did not have a permit. And I explained that I wasn't changing the structure, I was just beefing up the structure, and that theoretically, the way I understood it, you did not need a permit to do the work that I was doing as a homeowner. So, gets our next image is in 2020, okay? And what you're going to find is in 2020, I couldn't do anything with the house till I pulled the permit. So in 2020, sometime between then and 2022, okay, which was 2020, I purchased a second container. So I have this container and this container, and notice that that is prior to 2022. The reason I say that is the code changed. Now that's obviously up for debate because according to the zoning enforcement agent, Mr. DeBose, he says that nothing changed in the code. But I'm telling you, I have been working on this house. I've been trying to figure out how to get a permit, and I have been reading the code because I was going to do the work. Now, I have a different opinion. I feel it changed, and it didn't just change a little, it changed drastically for me because I used to be zoned RS, or I'm sorry, RC2. And in 2022, it became RSF 30, which in RSF 30 looks more like this, okay? It's 3,000, is the 30, it's not a hard rule, but if you read the tables, you'll see that an RSF 30 is essentially a 3,000 square foot lot size, okay? So you can see that it doesn't have that similarity with our two lot sizes, and that alone I did not understand. This is when I got the second problem with York County code enforcement, and I was told that the chickens that I was keeping in this area right here underneath a batting cage, that they had to be removed. The reason they had to be removed wasn't that there was any explicit terms that said you were not allowed to have chickens. Instead, Mr. DuBose told me that because there was nothing about chickens, you weren't allowed to have chickens. Okay. So prior to 2022, now the reason that that becomes important is when the code was released in 2022, then you were allowed to have chickens, which is very ironic because this is the same situation we're going to find ourselves in a minute when I start talking about how the code is changing. All right. And I understand Fort Mill is changing. I understand that these codes need to change. I get that. All I need to have a better grasp on is what the rules are. And that's what I've been searching for since day one. And Mr. DeBose has never been able to do anything except say the exact same thing as, well, York County just wants him to get rid of those shipping containers, which you would think my argument would be, oh, I just want to keep the shipping containers. That's not true. That's not true because what I want to do is I want to order the other 4 shipping containers so that I can create the house that I'm trying to create. You see, I have 1, 2, 3. Those are the 3 shipping containers that are currently on the site. And I want to purchase 1, 2, 3, 4 more shipping containers. Okay. So that's where we're at as of 2022 in the site file. If we look at 2023, you'll see that this house was built. Okay, so if I go back and look, you're going to see at this time they were bringing in lots of grade and they had torn out 2 mobile homes. Okay, now keep in mind when this property was purchased, it was zoned RC2, as I mentioned, and RC is supposed to stand for residential conservation. But as an architect friend of mine told me, Brian, you would be ridiculous to think that anyone would want to keep these 2 nasty mobile homes. Okay. So after this home is built, right about this time, you can see, and I mentioned earlier that I had thinned out all the evergreens. Well, I decided to take out a few more trees. There was 2 unhealthy ones, 2 large, very large poplars. As a matter of fact, you can see one of the trunks sitting right here. More importantly, this is my deck, my lumber deck. This is stacked with very large logs. Okay. So what happened then in 2023 is I had what's called a sawyer come out here, and we set up a lumber mill right on this deck right here. And I, with them, rough cut all of this lumber, including this log, and read the code. And the code that I was looking at there was this. Let's see. Let me go here. No, yeah. I looked up shipping containers, and what I found was the code that Keith is constantly referring to about shipping containers, but it says that in item B, the subpart does not apply to temporary shipping containers placed in a lot for less than 180 days. Well, I will be honest, in my rookie-ness and my naivete, I thought I was going to have that shipping container done. I thought the lumber would dry out within 6 months, especially if I put it in that container and had heavy sunlight exposure on that container and raised the temperature of that container. I thought that I was going to be under this case here when I moved that shipping container in, which is a temporary shipping container, typically rented by an individual or business for the temporary storage of materials. Well, if you were going to dry out wood and then later use the container for a structure on your house, it would be temporary storage of materials. Now, it does say it's commonly used for homeowners relocating from one home to another. Well, maybe that's the leeway that I need, because if I do end up moving, I would like to use these shipping containers to load my life into and take it to my next location. Okay. But either route, what I'm after is this is why I placed this 3rd shipping container. Now, I think I showed the other day that you see all the trees that are on the lot. Well, what I had actually done was I said, if I use my computer, can I study and see where that shipping container would receive the most daylight in a day? And I ran the calculations, and according to this, it showed me that that was the optimum space to put this shipping container right here. Okay. Keep in mind, in my mind at this point, you'll notice that from the previous image, all of that wood that was on the deck down here, all that big logs that were on the deck, they're now in the shipping container. Okay. And I do have some photographs of that. And I even can show you that it's progressed beyond that point and that I've milled it. But at any rate, that's why this shipping container was placed here. Well, that shipping container must have really angered these neighbors, because that's when this issue about the shipping container comes up now. Okay. So this has been the nightmare ever since. If we look, that was 2025. All right. So then the next thing that I wanted to show you is, okay, which one is it? There you go. Okay. So because I knew that the 180 days, and this is that shipping container in question. Okay. Because I knew it was going to take more than 180 days, I applied for a permit. Okay. Plus, I wanted to do the construction. Remember in 2019 when I was putting these windows in? Okay. That's when the inspector came up when I was putting these windows in. And he said, and these windows are salvaged from another house that was being torn down uptown Charlotte. And when I salvaged all the materials, which is in the blue shipping container over here, all of these windows and the doors and everything that I salvaged from that building. And to this day, there's still some mahogany and some hardwood flooring that are in that container that are going to be placed as finished materials. But this is what I was dealing with when I got stopped, was a cease and desist on working on the project until I pulled the building permit. So in 2020, I believe the date of this photograph was 2023. Now, keep in mind, it was May of 2023, and I had already pulled the building permit. But because this angered Mr. DeBose, because according to the code, if you have an active building permit, you're allowed to have these shipping containers. And he's currently trying to get me to remove this shipping container. The zoning administrator decided that I needed to send photographs and a narrative. Now, this typically isn't done, especially when you already have received the building permit. But I said, not a problem. So the first picture that I took was of the house, okay, in its current condition. This is where I stopped in 2019 because I didn't have a building permit. But then I decided that just so everyone involved could have a level of faith, I wanted to show you that that house is the exact same as the house I bought in 1991 across the street. However, I took that mill house and I added this 2-story addition. I added all of this work, did all of this under permit back in 2000. I did this section in 2000, and then I did the next section right here. And if you can actually see, which is difficult, the spot where the original mill house was the wall was here and it sprung up to there, and it was just the exact same mill house, just this little corner. So I was trying to show that I added all of this. I've done this before. I understand most homeowners don't do this level of renovation, and I'm not saying that I hired contractors to do this. I did the majority of this work. Okay. Now, unfortunately, I've gotten older, so this project has taken much longer. But this project has also taken much longer because let's remind ourselves, I was told to stop on the project until I pulled the permit. Then COVID hit. And that once COVID hit, money was tight. And because I hadn't paid my taxes weren't up to date at the end of the year. You can't pull the building permit until you have that resolved. So it wasn't until I could make enough money to have my taxes paid up that I could actually pull the permit. And that's the second thing to try to keep in mind is all of this work on this property across the street. Now, this is the interior shots because I wanted an explanation. This is what it looked like when I pulled my building permit in 2023. Okay. So the reason I show you that is I guess then I should probably try to show you what it currently looks like. And I'm just going to go ahead and play this so that we can I can talk a little bit free. So you'll see that after pulling my building permit, all right, there's a new roof on there. There's a new fascia. Apologize about that blurry photograph. But you also see that I've already started to cut the dirt for the next phase. I've already done a fair amount of terrain work. You'll notice that there's ample planting to provide screening, okay? But the problem that I have is the we had our first hearing in January, and then in April they expired my permit because I did not call for an inspection. Well, you can see this isn't typical construction, right? We have that list of when inspections are done, and for a typical house, that makes all the sense in the world. But my inspector said he didn't want me to come back out until I had the rough plumbing, the rough electrical, and the rough ductwork in. I did not need a framing inspection. He only ever came out for the one inspection. So I was supposed to do all of that work, all of the window work. Now, one thing I want to bring up to you as we're looking at this, if you look at all of the dark green trim on the house, let's have it come up right here. What you're going to find is all that dark green trim is the actual wood that came from that shipping container. Okay. You'll notice in the pictures here that that shipping container is starting to be cut into the configuration, because my opinion is, well, if I can't build on in York County with these shipping containers, I don't see why I can't do a decent amount of work prefabrication to have it shipped to where I'm allowed to have it. Okay. So that's why I've been working on it, which we're going to talk about later. Do those modifications change it to a shipping container structure as opposed to a shipping container? Because that is a real, I've been asking, you'll see I asked in both hearings. I've been asking Keith since day one, and I've never gotten an answer. What is required to do to that shipping container? And you can see the proximity of the neighbor's house. And I understand now, because I've heard that it was someone thinks that I thumbed my nose at that neighbor putting that shipping container there. Like I said, I really just did it because of a solar study I ran in the computer. I was hoping to get that wood dried out. So there you'll see the back of that shipping container has been removed. Okay. Now, the reason that that becomes important is when we get into the definition, according to York County, of what a shipping container is, it clearly says it's a six-sided steel object. Mine's not six-sided. Mine only has five sides. Now, if it's because that last 2 foot that I left above there, if that needs to be removed, I can get the structural integrity I need another way. But I'm not trying to thumb my nose or skirt the rules. I just want to know what the rules are. And that's where I have such an issue. So to say that no work was done on that house, now I know that you could have a crew come in and you could probably do that amount of work in a couple months. You got to understand, I've essentially been doing that work by myself. Okay. So what bothers me so much is it seems like, as a homeowner wanting to do his own work on his own house, and having to pay and wanting to pay for it, not having to, but wanting to pay for it, all that gravel, everything you're looking at, I didn't put on a credit card. I didn't take out a mortgage. I worked to earn the money, to do the work, to complete the process. And part of my big problem is when my permit expired, and I'm using air quotes for that. When my permit expired, it was because the project that I was working on that assured me that they were done in January, Gordon Ramsay changed his mind on his restaurant one more time for the seventh time, and it required me to work and redo all of that mechanical work for the several kitchens. Starbucks did the same thing. That I had to focus a fair amount on an actual computer to do the work. You'll notice right there the wood that we were talking about, that's the planed wood, ready that we have a tongue and groove put in it and be laid down for the floor. You'll notice that I've got all that wiring and all the duct work in. I'm ready for the inspection, but I can't call for an inspection because my permit expired. But my permit expired because I didn't call for an inspection within 6 months. I actually called at 6.5 months. Okay. And you'll hear me say, and I know it was a lame answer and it sounded terrible, but the judge asked me, well, what happened, Mr. Mitchell? And I said, life. What was life? Well, my mother in law required surgery, and we had to help take care of her, number one. Number two, it was my fifth daughter's senior year, and she wanted to go visit colleges, but more importantly, she looked at me and she said she really wanted to have a volleyball party for a graduation party. So her and I did all the work at the back of this site, okay, back there, which let's see if we can actually get back there again because I'd like to explain it to you a little bit. And I apologize. We'll probably end up using better photos. Let's see. Yep, right back here. So what we did, really, now it went to the front. I apologize. Sometimes it's just one of those days. So back here, what you're going to find is we actually, her and I together, we poured this concrete. We had this storm sewer put in. This is 9 feet tall. And we built this cool off tub or cold plunge tub so that when they're playing volleyball, and right now the net's not strung up, we hung nets. We did all of this work. So to say that I abandoned the construction site or that I was not working on the construction site, that's what we were doing. Okay. Now remember, I didn't have full time because I was indeed working a fair amount on the computer. I was helping with my mother in law. And as I said, we were visiting schools and attending award ceremonies. And if you know my daughters, there's never a shortage of award ceremonies. That was the life that I couldn't articulate when the judge asked me, what happened, Brian? Why aren't you done? Because I'll be honest, I felt overwhelmed. I felt really overwhelmed because I didn't feel like, you know, I've been working on this property I just showed you since 2010. This wasn't something that was a rush. But what I don't understand now is why we can't have any common sense to realize let's let Mr. Mitchell get his inspection done, put the insulation in the walls, have another inspection done, and then finish this thing and have a CO. Theoretically, you're talking about maybe 4, 5 weeks worth of work if you hire contractors. Now, I can hire contractors if that's what I have to do. The other choice is it might take me 6, 8 months to hang that drywall by myself and to finish up the fixtures and to hang the plumbing fixtures, the finished plumbing fixtures, and to put in the cabinetry and to do that work. I don't understand why a homeowner should be punished. It doesn't that's my biggest bone of contention. Okay. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the shipping container that, yes, I would like to take this shipping container, lift it, actually probably drag it with the skid steer, but have a crane lift it and place it over here so that I can end up with this result. Okay. You can see that these are the cutouts that I'm putting in those shipping containers to put the curtain walls in. And as I said, I'm still working on finalizing this design, which I now debate whether I should really do. Because if York County doesn't want me to do this, if I could just get someone other than Mr. Bose to tell me that, yeah, Brian, we really just don't want you to do that, I would say no problem, because I can do, oh, and this is going to end up crashing out. Isn't that funny, Revit? Bottom line is I have property purchased in Montana where these shipping containers are used for construction. Okay. If that is the case, then I get into a logistics of when I can do the construction. Okay. So that's where it would be very beneficial for me to come back at the end of the summer, probably more like the end of September, maybe October, prep this shipping container, have it loaded onto a truck and ready to go. But understand it's really difficult for me to take it to the site that it's going to prior to May of next year, because as I watch the land that I bought this year, they still have a little over 20 inches, but they've really had plus 40 inches of snow all the way into the beginning of May. I do not think I could get that shipping container up the mountain before June of next year. So if there's any way, believe me, first priority, I would love to stack those shipping containers and build that building that I've shown you that we've reviewed multiple times. If that can't happen, I would really appreciate the ability to have that shipping container, and it does not need to stay where it's at. Understand that the only reason it's here is I still have the final stack of oak, which is for my kitchen work and my finish work. But as I showed you, it was moving in here. There is all of the first stack of wood that was in those original pictures. And I don't know that I really explained that whenever I was showing this guy here. This was the conditions of the house when I pulled the permit. The other thing that they wanted was the contents of the container. All right. As I mentioned, they requested the narrative on how long it was going to take and all of that, and I was grossly off. I was more optimistic than I should have been. But at the same token, it's not 2 years that it has taken me to get to that point. York County last April essentially expired, revoked. I really don't understand that part, what they were able to do, because I've been working with an architect and looking at it, and we can't understand how they can expire the work, the active building permit, when work was being done. Work was being done. I mean, it says if the contractor, which of course, see, that's where I don't really fit because I'm the homeowner, not really a contractor, but I'm not a homeowner contractor. If they abandon the site for 6 months, if they pull up roots and leave for 6 months, that's one reason that it can be expired or revoked. The other is if work's not done. Neither one of those cases were those statements were met. I don't understand why you expired my permit. I do know that I was verbally told that I should really call for I needed to call for a inspection every 6 months, which is where we really get to the real bone with Mr. DuBose is in October, and he's aware of this. He states it in the hearing. On October 24th, I had called for a building permit, or I apologize, for an inspection. So he knew I called for an inspection. The inspector came out. According to all the rules that we've now gone over, that tells me I have 6 months of an active building permit. And yet the next month is when he wrote me the code violation for the shipping container. Now, if we can just talk about that one more time, I know I've covered this 100 times. Now, what Mr. DuBose is constantly pointing out is this section right here. Okay? There is no RSF. You are not, according to him, he says, because RSF is not listed here, okay? But it doesn't say that shipping containers are restricted from RSF, but I don't want to get into that deep amount. All I want to say, because RSF 30 is not listed here, I can't have a shipping container, okay? Now, what I explained is right here, it says you can have this. These don't apply for temporary. That's why I originally placed that shipping container. The next thing that we talked about was, I guess I could go into that. I just covered multiple times with you right here, this one here. The 6-sided steel unit. So if the side is removed, have I changed it from a shipping container? I don't know how I get that answer. That answer is really critical. You can see I removed one side of the shipping container. Is it still a shipping container? The last thing that was a problem, let's see, that was 155.718, 155.718. Okay, and that's where we look at this temporary use table. Okay, now this is where these temporary structures, they've sort of prescribed how a person can get the temporary structures on a construction site if there's an active permit. Okay, now here's where the confusion comes in. Remember, I pulled my building permit. Then Rachel contacted me and said, Mr. Mitchell, I need to know a narrative as well as the contents and pictures of the shipping containers. Well, that was because of this section right here. Okay. But notice what it says. It says unlisted temporary uses. See, the shipping containers being used as construction storage is a listed. See, it's in this temporary table. And you go to the next page, you would see, and this was discussed in the first hearing, and I didn't really hear an argument on how this didn't apply. It was construction storage. Okay. So the question is zoning compliance. Is that required? It says yes, if the use is not located on the same site as the associated construction, which means that no, I don't need a zoning compliance required because I have an active permit. And then the discussion was, well, you're not allowed to have 3 shipping containers. We will let you have 1 shipping container. But if you notice, it says there is no maximum if the associated construction has an active permit, which is where I think why someone needed that permit to expire so that it could be revoked, so I could be forced to remove the shipping containers. So that's where the problem comes in. When that citation was written, I had an active permit. This table accurately prescribes what the situation is. And I believe the original judge, Judge Wood, that might have been, I believe he agreed with that. And he asked Mr. Dubose what that situation was. And what that situation was we got a continuance so that they could revoke my permit. So the next time we came in, then all of a sudden, Mr. DeBose had no problem with this table because I no longer had an active permit. But how did I not have an active permit? I was doing work on the site. What did I do? Is it really because I called for an inspection 3 weeks late? No, you understand. We're talking about April. I was actually in Rochester, New York at a university, spent a week with my other daughter in Philadelphia, and came back to focus 100% on her graduation. For that's why I'm being punished. It doesn't seem fair. And I apologize if this just seems like whining. And all I'd really like to know is how can we remedy this situation? If I need to move out of York County, move to the other side of the country, I'll be glad to do it. I can't tell you how disappointed I am in the amount of time that I've had to waste on this quagmire. I appreciate you listening.